Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and an ongoing study in Teilhard de Chardin's Phenomenon of Man. So our second lesson, we're going to take a look at pages 39 to 49, and we're going to get a look at the first phase of the triad. Remember, he teaches a triad of pre-life, life, and thought. He begins on page 39 with pre-life, but it's always going to be at the same time a consideration of the entire triad. So we'll get another glance here into the specific nature of this triad that marks out Teilhard de Chardin's phenomenology. Let's go to block 1 and we'll get started. Okay. Elemental matter includes the aspects of plurality, unity, and energy. Elemental matter, science gives us the representation of the atom, and it allows science to posit non-contradiction in the effects of matter. But this provides no prolonged further information concerning man. But there are three aspects of elemental matter. So block 1, note 2, the three aspects of elemental matter are plurality, unity, and energy. Plurality. We split matter artificially into the atomic character of finite experience. But atomic reduction of existence only results in a view of the world that is blurred at best. Now, unity, matter continuously asserts its own fundamental unity through identity of mass, through identity of behavior. Now here's the most important aspect for Teilhard de Chardin, energy. And it is the measure of passing from one atom to another as a course of genuine transformation. And it results in the atom being enriched in the process or exhausted in the process. When we look at it this way, then material corpuscles are like little reservoirs that remain in a state of kind of a primordial flux, awaiting the movement of transformation. And that falls under the category of energia in the Greek, or energy in English. That's the most important category for Teilhard de Chardin, energy. It's evident in elemental matter, and it'll be further defined when we move to consider the other aspects of the triad. We move into life and we move into thought. Energia plays a significant role. Let's go to block 2. So what about understanding the concept of energia actualization as a triad? So this developing energy, this developing energia, needs to be understood as the triad. It is a system of plurality, a unified totem, and a quantum of energia. As a system of plurality, and this is really important for Teilhard. The existence of system is obvious in nature, he says. Just through observing nature, it's obvious that there is an existing system to the order of nature. There is an existing system. We do affirm, therefore, the interdependence of all the parts, but at this level we can only label it the phenomenon of composition. We can't give it any deeper meaning yet, but it is evident even in nature. But at this very basic level, all we can talk about for system is the phenomenon of composition. And it is a subsistence maintained by the apex of the whole. Now the apex, if you normally think of that term, it's always the high point, like the high point of a pyramid. It's always the upward point. Now, what you have to understand for Teilhard de Chardin, the apex point is a forward point, not an upward point. It is a forward point. It is an omega point. It is an eschatological omega horizon. It's not an upward apex, it's a forward apex that we can focus on to help us understand this triad. So it's the highest, this phenomenon of systematic composition is all held together and maintained by the highest forward hierarchy. The most forward apex of the whole, which he calls the omega point, and it is an eschatological forward horizon. Now, energy is also a unified totem expressed in a triad. It begins as a vague circle of electrons. Then it evolves to a better defined, distributed set of elements. And then third, it develops into zones of the infinite, which contribute to and participate in an organic whole. So you go from a vague understanding of this system to the structural distribution of the elements within the system. And then we grasp how this system actually participates in a larger organic whole. So energy unfolds in a trifold totality, a unified totem, being vague, then being structurally distributed, and then recognized as participating in a larger organic whole. Then we move into Block 2, Note 3. And here we get into quantum of the energia. Unified concrete space coincides with the totality of conscious space. See, there you go. He's always going to, even though we're in this pre-life phase, he's going to bring in information within all three phases, because all three phases interpenetrate each other. So the quantum of energia, the concrete space, coincides with the totality of conscious space. We are forced into redefining what energia actualization means. And there's two sides to it, two aspects to it. The energia that actualizes the system evident in nature is immense, first of all. It has the aspect of immensity, and secondly, the aspect of universality. Immensity and universality. The sphere of all action extends to the very limit of the cosmos. The radius of influence of every action finds its limit point, it'll extend to the very limit of the cosmos. But this immensity exists within a shared universal sphere, universality. And that provides the dynamic standard of energia. So you have this, for Teilhard de Chardin, you have this evolution of the actual elements of matter. They form together into a very evident system, even at the pre-life level, but we have to give some kind of a definition to that pre-life systematic order, and we kind of call it a interdependence of the parts that are all joined together according to the horizon within which they participate, which is a future forward omega point. And that is the point that guides and holds together this interdependence of all elements, even at the level of pre-life matter, elemental matter. And as energia, therefore, we look at the immensity of all actions of influence, and they all participate in a universal shared sphere of existence. This universal sphere of existence, initially at this level, all he can call it is the phenomenon. We're in the level of phenomenology, okay? So all we can call it at this level is the phenomenon of composition. It is not going to remain labeled the phenomenon of composition, but Teilhard is writing phenomenology. You begin with phenomenon, but just like Immanuel Kant said, he and Hegel in dialogue, there's a phenomenal realm, there's a noumenal realm of spirit, and Teilhard de Chardin is going to address this realm of spirit in the second half of this book. But initially, we begin at the pre-life level, and all we can say of the systematic interdependence of all elements of elemental matter is that they participate in a universality of the phenomenon of composition. They all participate in a universality that encloses all immensity, and that universality is called the phenomenon of composition in the realm of phenomena. But we're not going to stay there. This is just the initial stage. We're moving from phenomena toward the noumenal realm, and like Hegel, Teilhard de Chardin, remember I told you in the last lesson, Teilhard de Chardin is the French version of Hegel. Teilhard de Chardin was writing phenomenology in France the same time that G.W. Hegel was writing phenomenology in Germany. They both were writing a phenomenology of spirit, even though Teilhard de Chardin called his a phenomenology of man. It's still a phenomenology of spirit, but he labeled it phenomenon of man. So let's move on to block 3 now. We have looked at the elemental matter in block 1 and its 3 aspects. Then we looked at the process of this movement within elemental matter, a movement of energia, actualization, and what it's doing is unfolding a triad of plurality, unified totem, and quantum of energia. And we looked at that in block 2, and it's all about an energia force of interdependence that at this level Teilhard de Chardin says we can label it only the phenomenon of composition. It shall not remain only the phenomenon of composition, because it will later participate in the further development of dialectical thought, and we will pass through from pre-life to life, from life to thought. But this gives us in Block 1 and Block 2 elemental matter and the interdependence of elemental matter as energia interdependence. Now we go to Block 3. The evolution of matter leads to the work of the vision of consciousness and ontological reality. There you go. There you go. Okay, so in Block 3 now, we're moving on to the evolution of matter with this force of energia working through it. It becomes coupled with the work of the vision of consciousness. Like I said, even though this is an early lesson, he's going to discuss all three phases of his triad. They're all going to get mentioned, even at this level. And when we get this vision of consciousness and its contribution, we start talking about ontological structure of being. The evolution of matter and its three stages. We have a pre-life equilibrium, which is the system of stable elements. Okay? Then they become drawn forward into the history of the real. Finally, they enter into the duration of sustained ontological thought. That takes us on to the, by the way, that's really important there. Block 3, Note 1, put a circle around that, because that really is an excellent definition of the three stages of matter. Equilibrium, then from equilibrium to historical reality, and then to ontological thought. Keep those three levels of influence in your mind. So Block 3, Note 2, the work of the vision of consciousness. It also has a threefold process. It does think backward into the unfathomable past to grasp that which is significant and contributes to the ontic genetic movement, and then it works as a continuation forward into an eschatological future without limit. Transformation ends up transcending the scientific quantitative level. This thoughtful transformation stage of the vision of consciousness is going to move us beyond the phenomenon of composition. We're going to get into something of deeper meaning. We're not going to remain at the level of the phenomenon of composition. Now, Block 3, Note 3, this transformation takes place as an ontological genetic order. We participate in the, remember, now ontology is what? It's the philosophy of the structure of being. Ontology is the philosophy of the structure of being, the structure of existence. And Teilhard de Chardin tells us that eventually, through this vision of consciousness, we start developing and contributing to the ontic genetic order. We must transcend the scientific perspective of quantitative equilibrium. Appearance reveals an ever-growing complication. There you go. Remember, go back to block 2. What are we doing? We're trying to move on beyond describing the system evident in the world as merely a phenomenon of composition. There's something more there than a phenomenon of composition. Well, he's telling us here in block 3. We must transcend the scientific perspective of quantitative equilibrium. Appearance gives us an ever-growing complication. Within the finite realm, we find the presence, and I love this, of luminous simplicity that stands in defying to be described as quantitative only. It refuses to be described as quantitative. It is a luminous simplicity. It's a luminous simplicity that reaches back for us from a future omega point horizon. Remember, it's eschatological and always forward thinking. So there is this structural and historical arrangement, and he says, we're going to label this now, this ontic genetic order, the law of complexification, the law of complexity, the law of complexification. I'd rather just say law of complexity, but he says the law of complexification. And that law of complexification creates the objective ontic genetic order, which we grasp subjectively in order to move beyond the quantitative and in order to further develop that block 2 label. The system of the order of energia in existence. We must move beyond the realm of phenomenon. We must move beyond our phenomenon of composition and start talking about an ontic genetic order which develops because of the vision of consciousness, and the vision of consciousness is that which shares in a intersubjective law of complexification, a law of complexification. Okay, we're going to wrap up here because that's more than any of us can really take in one session. I mean, don't you feel a little bit like we're into Hegel again here? I mean, you think Hegel was difficult to grasp? Teilhard de Chardin is right there with him because they have both written during the same period of time. Teilhard de Chardin is the French version of Hegel in Germany, but they both wrote a triad of phenomenology, and in this lesson we finally have a pretty good grasp of how this triad is to develop. That wraps up 39 to 49. We will continue at page 50 in our next lesson.